because then those differences are just external. And just like we wear different clothes, that's the external stuff that really doesn't matter. It's in our common humanity.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the thing that matters. That spark of divinity in each and every one of us that makes us the same.
Hey, welcome back to the Daron Earlewine Podcast, episode 62 here, continuing the Divided podcast series. This is the last week of the Divided series. So glad you downloaded this episode. You're watching here on YouTube, Spotify, whatever channel that you watch the podcast or download it. Let me say thank you so much for downloading this episode, sharing it with some friends. We'd love to get feedback from you and hear what you're learning, questions you have. And so you can always reach out. You can email me, Daron@blackbirdmission.com, or you can text me, 317-550-5070, or always you can reach out on social media. Today I sit down with my friend Julie Tornquist. Been friends with Julie for many, many years. And what she's going to help us take a look at as we hear her story of building bridges and understanding how to bring people together relationally in our divided culture is, I guess if we wanted to entitle this, it would be, how does an Enneagram 5 build bridges? And we're going to talk about a little bit of her story, about some of the lenses in which she sees the world and how that's guided her journey to build relationships and to be a peacemaker and a bridge builder. But what you're going to hear is the way that Julie approaches building these kinds of relationships and how she does it and how that's influenced as an Enneagram 5. And something that's we're really passionate about here on the Daron Earlewine Podcast is helping you become who you were born to be. And we know that you do that as you discover who God's created you to be. And that's what the Spiritual DNA online course helps you do. And as Julie unpacks this, I think you're going to enjoy seeing how God has equipped her uniquely to build bridges, how she would. And what I hope is you watch this episode, it inspires you to discover how God's created you so that you can be the most efficient and the most effective and the most impactful of building bridges across the great divides of our world so that we can be people that bring about peace, that bring about love, that bring about hope in the world around us. So without any further ado, let's jump into my conversation with my good friend, Julie Tornquist, right here on the Daron Earlewine Podcast. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Daron Earlewine Podcast. Another week in our Divided series here, and I'm excited to sit down with my good friend, Julie Tornquist. Julie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So, Julie, we have been friends since you moved from Maine to Indianapolis.
Yeah.
And I don't even remember, 2006. So you came in 2006. You attended a church that I was leading at that point.
Yeah.
And right off the bat, I could tell that you were a free thinker, that you were not interested in living in the molds cut for you in the standard life of Christendom or whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
And I was drawn to that. And I've always been drawn to the way that you think and the way that you have been led by God, but also been obedient to find yourself in some of the, maybe more awkward, uncomfortable middle places of ideas in life. And I'm excited to discover that journey and talk a little bit with you about some of those things on the podcast.
Sounds good.
So we talked first week, and then last week I got a chance to sit down with my friend Lena Morris, and we talked about lenses and some of the lenses that we see the world through, and what are some of the lenses like fear and ignorance and stuff that get in the way of us actually seeing the world the way Jesus would have us see it. Give us a little introduction. Give us some of the lenses that Julie Tornquist, wears because of her life, or has worn maybe.
Yeah. I grew up in a very rural area, very agrarian, lots of farmers having a hard time. So saw a lot of that. We didn't grow up with a whole lot of money. Then I went to college.
We're out in the country?
Up in northern Maine,
okay.
Like extreme northern Maine. People think Maine and they think the coast. I'm like, no, moose are walking down Main Street and speaking French to us.
Okay, so almost Canada. I mean, you're way out there.
I mean, like Sarah Pan, I could see Canada from my window. Yeah.
Okay.
Right there on the border.
All right.
So more like Quebec.
Okay.
But then I went off to college to Portland, Maine, which was a much bigger place, and loved it. loved the energy. But even as a child, I dreamt of like living in a city, living in New York. I just always knew from the books I read that that's where I would end up.
Yeah.
We ended up then moving to Ohio, moved back to Maine to raise a family because I figured, that was a good place to raise a family. And then we ended up here in Indianapolis here back in 2006 and started out in Carmel, and great community, but it wasn't, that wasn't my tribe. I liked the dirt and the grime of downtown and just the diversity, on all levels. So yeah, we bought a big old house downtown and haven't looked back.
So a lot of that's not, the standard playbook, right? Like your husband has, a great job, affords you the freedom and the ability to live where you want in the city.
Yeah.
And the standard Midwestern playbook, right, is we have a job like that. You live in the suburb, your nice house, and you stay away from crime, you stay away from problems, you stay away from difficult conversations. But that wasn't the playbook you were looking to abide by.
No, I mean, when we first got here, all I knew about Indianapolis was that there was a race once a year. That was it.
Okay.
And our realtor basically took one look at us and, well, you're white. Your husband is an executive, so, your people live up in Carmel. And so we bought the house up in Carmel and some great people up there. My people don't necessarily live up in Carmel. And so we made the change when we could, because we found we were living downtown but sleeping in Carmel, and it made no sense.
So on the journey to this point, I mean, just real quickly, faith came into your life in a meaningful way when?
In summer camp in 4th grade.
Okay.
Was kind of the beginning of an awareness that there's a creator.
Yeah.
And that there is a plan. And then further on in college, I did some church stuff and just got really connected with some people. I ended up basically homeless. School had ended. I had to stay late because I was in the music program, so I had to play for graduation. And my ride left the day before, so I'm sitting on the curb with all my stuff, wondering where I'm going to go that night. And friends who I had been going to this Bible study with got together, found me a place, and I never went home again. Like I go home to visit,
right?
But it was never home again. And from there, it was the relationships that I made within that Bible study group. Yeah. It was about relationships, and we really wanted to do life together. My grandmother called me one day, and they thought I was in a cult because we all lived together. We all lived in various houses around the city, and we just did life together. Yeah. My kids call it my hippie church days. Yeah. And that was where I really understood relationship, both with my creator and with people. Yeah. And how deep we get to go with people.
And I think when you guys first moved here from Maine, I think that I was in a place where God was reshifting some of my priorities and view on church and what community was and and we definitely saw things similar to that. And I enjoyed that season of life that we had and what you influenced in my life in that. And I love that you brought up that you developed such a high value of a relationship in that, because that's influenced the way you've expressed your faith, but it's also been a part. I mean, thinking back, last week when we talked to Lena, when she talked about how relationships so often is the context and the environment that's necessary if we're going to ever be able to really understand the lenses that are dividing us. Yeah. And so that's been a high value for you since then.
Well, because I think sometimes church people can tend to put on the facade when they go and meet people at church and do their group things, and you're not pushed to really put that down and be really who you are. Yeah. And so it's hard to have relationship with cardboard cutouts. and unless people know the dirtiness
Right.
of my life,
Right.
They can't know me. And I expect the same kind of give and take.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Your desire for that authenticity in relationship, it did when you moved here. It led you to move down to the east side of Indy. If somebody's, if you're watching or listening from Indianapolis, you're going to go, "Oh, really? Like the east side of Indy?" Which
the near east side,
nearest side, right?
Yeah.
Where if you're not in Indianapolis, it's probably one of the highest crime areas of our city. But it's over the past probably decade or so, it's gotten a little bit weird because it seems like maybe every year, the revitalization or whatever of downtown takes probably another street or two over, and houses that probably were, almost falling down, and you could maybe gotten for $70,000 are now knocked down, and there's a $500,000 brand new.
Entire neighborhoods are now where there were just vacant brownfields. And it's really been in the last 3 years.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's increasingly gotten better.
Better and worse, I guess.
And worse, because that also creates a push of people who have lived there. Apartment rental is so much more expensive now. Property taxes are going up. I mean, there are consequences to revitalization, and it's a kind of a funny dance that city government has to do.
So you guys went down there.
So yeah,
relationship drew you, the desire to be around a tribe, but that would not be normative for a white, middle-aged, upper middle class person to be like, you know what? Yeah, let's take our kids and our life and let's go down to the east side. You guys did, and it put you in a unique space to be in the middle of a lot of that. And one thing that I've always appreciated about you, Julie, and it is a part of who God's created you to be, thinking back to building on last week's episode as well, when Lena was talking about one of the first things, you got to know who God's created you to be in a certain situation. You're an Enneagram 5, the investigator. You dig deep and understand situations.
Yeah.
You're not at a surface level with anything. You love knowledge. God's created you that way. And how has that thirst for knowledge and relationship, how has that influenced and I guess impacted your life being in the middle of culture and race and social class and everything on the east side?
I think most of it is my question's always why not?
Okay.
When I'm getting ready to go downtown, I had realtors tell me, don't go in that neighborhood, don't go here, don't, you want to look other places. I'm like, well, why not? And I'm very much invested in, I like people. I like to get to know very different people because I like knowing other people's experiences. I know. So I just kind of set up shop at a grimy little coffee shop on the Near East Side and started meeting people. Even before we moved downtown, I got involved in some charter school issues downtown while we were still living in Carmel, and I just got to know a lot of people who were from the area, and I just decided that that's where my tribe is. They were the ones that accepted me as I was. I didn't have to get dressed up to go shopping.
Right. Did you, be honest, was there any fear when you first headed down there?
No.
No, not at all.
No, not for me. And that sounds like super arrogant, but I also understand that things are just what they are. And if I'm going to get hit by a bus, I trust my timeline. I trust my creator. I am where I am every minute of the day because that's where I should be.
Okay.
And if something bad happens in that, well, then there's something I need to learn from that. I've had some health issues the last few years, and I could ask myself why,
right?
But why not me? And what do I get to learn from? How do I get to change things, knowing now what I know?
Okay, but I'm going to give you an extra you would have, your life would say that Julie Tornquist has an extra dose of courage that a lot of people don't have. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, which is good.
I would say something, but
Okay.
you probably wouldn't want to record it. So yeah.
So you are courageous, I guess. So let's say there wasn't fear, but here's what I want to get to. You're in the coffee shop, you're meeting people, you find yourself like, I'm different than that person. I think different than this person. I have like all of the different things that you're learning. How? Go ahead.
No, I look at them and I see the sameness.
Okay.
And that, I think, is where some of my ability to say, well, why can't I go there? We are humans. We are created by the same creator. And if you peeled everything external off about us, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. And so, yeah, I see sameness.
So instead of starting from what are all the things that are different on the outside, we can at least go back to the fact that we're humans. We're created in the image of God.
Yeah.
We have the same desires and needs to love, and all these things are here. Well, let's start from that common humanity, and then let's unpack it to the outside,
Right.
knowing that we're coming from the same place in the core.
Because there's no fear there. There's fear in the differences. There's no fear in the you and I are the same at a core spiritual level. And there's no room for fear.
That's really good, Julie. Makes me think about JT, Jonathan Thomas. We had him on the podcast, and he has an organization called Civil Righteousness. And when there are social unrest and riots and things that break out, like he literally goes. I mean, he was in Ferguson, he was out in Oregon, in Portland last year, and he's on the streets in the middle of riots, just bringing people together. And he talked about how racism itself is an affront against the image of God.
Oh,
in each
absolutely.
of us, and being able to understand that if we can go that core to find empathy, connection, and love and grace for each other, and then work from the center out, we have a foundation that allows us to begin to understand differences and lenses and perspectives.
Because then those differences are just external. And just like we wear different clothes, that's the external stuff that really doesn't matter. It's in our common humanity.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the thing that matters. That spark of divinity in each and every one of us that makes us the same.
Hey guys, quick commercial break here halfway through the episode. Want to encourage you to get this PDF that I talk about in this series, of the Divided series. And what it is, it's a 2-page PDF I want to send you. You just get it by emailing at info@blackbirdmission.com, info@blackbirdmission.com, and just put in the message lenses. Because what this is, a 2-page PDF, it's going to help you really take some looks at your life of how much in your life are you viewing through the frame of fear, and what would it look like if you were to begin to see your life through the lens of love, the lens of Jesus. And I think it's going to be a great little PDF just to give you some time to get curious, to get compassionate, and to get some perspective on what lenses may be actually inhibiting your ability to be a great bridge builder. I want to send this to you for free. Just go to email us at info@blackbirdmission.com. In the subject line, just put lenses PDF. We'll send it to you immediately. Thanks so much. Let's get back to the interview. Julie, let's talk about some of the conversations you find yourself in. And you love information. You love digging into the core and the center of issues. And you would call yourself, I've heard you call yourself more of a classic liberal.
Yes.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Living in Maine,
Okay.
I would have considered myself a conservative.
Okay.
Republican. Okay. But Maine is East Coast, so a Republican in Maine is a Democrat almost anywhere else in the country.
Okay.
And so my views were actually a much more liberal than the conservatives here in the Midwest.
Yeah.
But not entirely. There are a lot of things that I agree with on the right.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of things that I agree with on the left. And so, yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm standing on with my one foot in a different canoe, each foot in a different canoe. And every once in a while they, I'm like, whoa, because that's kind of what that middle space feels like. I intentionally try to straddle that middle space because if people don't straddle it and stand in the divide, then it just gets bigger.
What's some of the most uncomfortable realities of finding yourself trying to do that often?
I find that people are offended by some of my views, some of the things that I say from both sides. I mean, there are days I would just like to tuck it and like let the shots go over me and take a break. But I try to engage in conversations on both sides.
Yeah.
And
so you find that basically you're offending everybody.
Oh yeah. Yeah, pretty much. But I am finding more people who are either naturally more in the middle because that's just how they were created, or they are starting to listen. They're starting to listen to the reality. The only thing I know that is true is that everything I know could be wrong. And so as people start to understand that what you think you know might be wrong, then there's a certain amount of grace that arrives with that.
Yeah.
And it's a surprising thing sometimes when people, I could be wrong about a fundamental belief that I have. And that opens up just immense conversations. The potential is massive.
Within the Christian world, don't you think if you would consider yourself a fundamental Christian, it almost puts you in a place where you can't actually consider that you could actually be fundamentally wrong about something you fundamentally believe?
And that's where relationship comes in. Because you can't tell someone, you might be wrong unless you have relationship with them. If you trust them and they're trusting you and you really have put in some time, and you talk about some of the smaller things and you build to that. There's a guy, Daryl Davis, who serves on the advisory board for a foundation I'm on, but he's a Black musician. Father was in the Foreign Service, lived all over the place. And he has a whole closet full of Klan robes because he started 20 years ago becoming friends with Klan members. Actually,
Really?
Friends. And he's got like Grand Poobah robes. I mean, like from dozens and dozens.
Because after he befriended these guys, they gave him the robes,
they
basically?
found out that we have more in common than not. They found out that this Black man in front of me isn't what my lens said he was. And as he became someone that was more important to their lives. I mean, he would go to their weddings. If a kid was sick, he would go to the hospital. He was so intentional about creating relationship with people who he knew when he first met them that they hated him. And he has a whole collection, a closet full of Klan robes because he put the time in and the intentionality to create relationship. And that's when people can go, maybe I'm wrong about that.
And I think you were telling me about it. There's a part of that where when you talk about being kind of a traditional, whatever, a classic liberal, is there that openness to think like maybe I need to dig a little deeper here just for the sake of digging, right?
Yeah.
Just for the sake of seeing and considering maybe there is a different perspective here that I need to bring in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you take the definition of the word science.
Okay.
People say, the science is settled. Well, if you understand science,
It's never
science is
settled,
never
right?
settled. And a classical liberal is always looking for the truth. And, one decade, the truth about whether or not you can cure polio is very different from the truth of the next decade. So I'm not saying that truth changes.
Yeah.
But as we really look for truth and take that journey and go where it takes us, then we get to. It's a privilege to go, I was wrong about that. Yay.
Wow, that's good. There is so much humility that needs to be there, right? Along the whole way of like, I'm walking humbly here because I know I could be wrong.
Yes. And so I'm a 5.
Yeah.
So for me, that doesn't feel like humility because most anybody that knows me, I don't know that they would say I'm humble. I am just voraciously hungry for information
And for truth.
and knowledge and truth.
Okay.
To the point where I can be offensive
Okay.
and I can be not as loving in some, I have to tell myself, wait a minute, not everybody has done the research you've done. Not everybody's read the books you've read.
Right.
Not every, and that's where I have to put the brakes on and just kind of let it be for a little while.
But I think same way I talked with Lena last episode about her, God creating her to be, in that middle space and bringing people together. Hers is a different path. But one thing that you've done for me with your, ferocious need for knowledge is I can remember, during the election, last year is for me hearing all the narratives, right? The 2 narratives basically that are given to us about all issues, right? Something in my spirit being like, these answers are too simplistic.
Yeah.
And I don't think this is the way it is.
Yeah.
And sitting down with you and because you have dug deep into things, you were able to bring me into some of these middle spaces and go, well, consider this. Do you feel like that's is a part of the gift that you are to relationships because you dig to the depths of that?
I think it's yes. And I think it's because I don't see the world, and I never have, in as 2 sides. There are so many facets to what the truth is. And if you're only looking at one of those facets or through one of those lenses,
Yes,
you're only seeing a little tiny piece of it, and you're only seeing that tiny piece of it from your own perspective.
Yeah.
And that's just far too limiting for me.
Yeah.
Because I'm a 5.
Yeah. Well, I love what, one of the things I think I shared in one of the episodes prior is in his Language for Healing for a Polarized Nation, Wayne Jacobson, one of the points he talks about is that we have to abandon binary thinking.
Yeah.
Like that everything is an either or. No, actually, in so many situations, it's both and.
Yeah.
And that's as biblical as it comes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's grace and truth, right? And I don't know. I think so many people struggle to be okay in that liminal type of space to realize like, no, there's probably a both and here, and I need to dig deeper than the easy answer to figure it out.
And I think part of it is because not everybody has the time to do what I do.
Yeah.
And they only have the information that has come in front of them. We could go. Education. It used to be a much more classically liberal education back in the day. I have my grandmothers who died 8 years ago, I think, 7 years ago today. But I have her 5th grade grammar book. 5th grade.
Yeah.
A college student would have a hard time understanding the grammar, the breakdown of the sentences. They would have a very difficult time understanding it.
Wow.
And education has taken a real nosedive as we've allowed our kids to be experiments to these systems.
Okay.
And oftentimes it's a system of power. You've got the unions, you've got the administration, there's all that stuff going on. And I don't think humans we don't have the education system anymore to really create deep thinkers. the expectations. We expect so little from kids.
Yeah.
When I look at what Abe Lincoln, how he taught himself so much.
Yeah.
And Booker T. Washington, Frederick Douglass, and like all these just incredibly intellectually talented, amazing people.
Yeah.
And they were self-educated. And I think we've kind of killed education in a lot of ways, which is a whole different topic.
It is a whole different topic. And I think, but it applies in that, like it comes through in your passion for knowledge, your passion for truth. And so anywhere you see where it's lacking or being attacked, you know what I mean, or deconstructed, it brings out a level of obviously of passion and engagement for you. How do you help someone? Julie, is we talked about the perspectives. We talked about needing that. Talked about digging deep in things. How do you help somebody start that process? I mean, you can't want it for them, but I mean, how do you help somebody get started in that?
I argue with them.
Okay.
Gently. And in the truest classically liberal sense of that.
Yeah.
It's not a fight. It's well, what if? And it's a very Socratic, Socrates, that the Socratic method was he would ask a question that would make people think about, well, what could the answers possibly be?
Yeah.
And so there's a certain leading to that.
Yeah.
And it's also about giving resources. I mean, in the homeschool community, when I was raising my kids, I was the resource person because I'm a 5 and I had all the resources, but that's kind of what I do now.
Well, I've texted you and asked you questions about something in culture, and you're like,
I'm like,
here's,
boom, 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 boom.
Here's 4
Here you
books
go.
and 3 podcasts. Have fun.
Yeah. And so that's kind of, and if somebody will take the time and actually look at some of the things, then they always come back with questions.
Yeah.
Always.
One of the things I love about that is when we had this conversation on a Sunday morning a couple of weeks ago at our church, one of the points I made at the end of it, and we were speaking, we talked about a lot of different topics, but one of them was race, and we made the point in there that like it's not like for all of the white people in the audience, like it's not your one black friend's job to educate you on African American perspective.
Yeah.
In our culture. And so one of the things I think is the gift that, and we've been talking about how both you and Lena are somebody that find themselves in the middle. And so like, I love how you're speaking right now. There's going to be, podcast listeners, and viewers who they may see themselves in you, and maybe they're a white suburban person, right? Or maybe they're a white or urban person, whatever, or they're a black, person living in a predominantly white, context, whatever it could be. But God has gifted them to be someone who digs deep for truth and can be a resource for people where, you can be a gift to a lot of white people that may be like, where do I start to understand? Well, don't bombard all your black friends. Like, find a friend like Julie that can say like, here's the 6 things you need to look at, read, watch this video, come back and talk, and I'll start asking you a lot of open-ended, difficult questions for you to wrestle with perspective, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I like to ask those questions. I like to peel the onion, and I like to get people to peel. And once they start, they kind of can't stop themselves because we were created to be a very curious people.
Yeah.
I mean, that is how we are all wired.
Yeah.
And I think that the way we live life in society just really kind of tamps that down. We're on our phone, we're on our computer, we like it's screens. It's people aren't reading the way they used to read.
Yeah.
And so the minds aren't being stretched. And man, when a mind starts to get stretched, you just kind of see it. And lights start going off, and I'm like, all right, you're off to the races now.
Yeah. When did you start to see that was a ability that you had, Julie, to help open people's minds to be thinkers?
I have no idea. It's just who I am.
Yeah.
And I must have been an awful student. Like, I would be a horrible employee because I don't tell me what to do
Right.
or how to do it or where to do it or when to do it, because I'm on a quest.
There's a
And if you
strong-
want to come along for the ride, all right.
Right.
And so I really have to fight that and slow down enough to be able to bring people along.
Yeah. Makes me think, I wonder if you're within the Enneagram stuff that we talk about in spiritual DNA, probably an Enneagram 5 wing 4, because
Oh, yeah.
you're an investigator, but you no problem being an individual. You know, the
Yeah.
individualist of just saying, like, I'm on this journey. This is the way it's going to be. I'm going to do it this way.
Yeah.
So let's say you're talking to somebody who's right there, Julie, and they're inspired. They want to help. They want to dig into the deeper things in life. They're not uncomfortable being in the middle. They're not uncomfortable realizing, like, listen, I'm probably going to offend everybody at some point in this conversation, but we're going to get to truth. What's a piece of encouragement that you could give them?
Stay the course. I mean, I don't know that there's an encouragement I can give them. Know who you are.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid, because if you're really searching for truth,
Yeah.
there just shouldn't be any fear in that. It may change your life,
Right. It may not be comfortable.
but if that's true,
Yeah.
then it should.
I like it.
See, and that sounds like super simplistic to me. But
Why?
because this is one of my biggest struggles has always been, how can you not know that? There's that, like, if I know this, surely you must know this. And no, it took me so long to figure out that no, not everybody thinks the way I think, interprets it the way I do, because I'm just so far down the road
Yeah.
by myself.
Yeah. Right.
That I never really understood that no, most people actually don't think that way.
Well, I think it's
And don't.
we all have a blindness, I think, to our strength. Like, that's a superpower God's given you the way He's created you. And for you, it's like, it's so second nature. You're like, well, we all do this, right? It's like, no, Julie.
Apparently not.
No, Julie. None of us have read 5 books on this subject and listened to all the podcasts and
So,
have
yeah.
that much knowledge, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think it is good. And I actually enjoy that. I feel like we're being more specific with encouragement to types, and roles in these episodes than I thought we would be going in. But I think I really dig that, because it's like, if you're watching or you're listening, and it's like, that's me. I'm an Enneagram 5. I'm a teacher guardian. Like the world needs you.
Yeah.
Because the world needs people that can help guide people into understanding and truth and deep thinking. And that's not just given to you to enjoy deep books and novels, right? You have a role to play to bridge the divide as you can help bring people to truth and education and thinking.
Yeah. And I don't even set out to intentionally bring people to truth and it.
Sure.
I just I want somebody to talk to about all this stuff.
Yes, yes.
And as this doesn't feel quite right to me. There are certain issues that I don't know if I like the way the left is going with that.
Right.
I don't know if I like the way the right is going with that. And I like to try and find the people
Yes.
who will have the conversations
Yeah.
instead of just lobbing bombs
Yeah.
across the divide.
Well, Julie, I love that. I love your heart. I've always loved to kind of draft off of your thought and your curiosity. And I appreciate you being on the podcast today and this conversation. I'm sure we'll have many more as we go forward.
Thanks.